Hi, it's Tiffany Lorraine Galloway. I'm the host of the Resilient Mother podcast, and I started it because of my own journey to resilience. I've done everything I can to gather resources, true stories, and inspiration, and now I'm bringing that to you. And I have a new co-host with me.
So I'm Catherine Tyson Soil, and mothers, we are creating the future. So Tiffany, you and I were on this train together, and I'm very excited about bringing amazing women's stories, mothers, help and resources and excitement, and just learning from you and learning from me and learning from all of us, just how to be resilient, how to take care of ourselves, how to take care of our children, because as we say on the Resilient Mother podcast,
happy mothers, happy children, happy homes is the goal. And that's all right. So here we are with another episode of the Resilient Mother podcast. We're continuing the conversation on resilience versus resistance. And just a side note, this episode is being re-recorded technically for the third time. So we're being resilient here and getting this message to you. And I think it's a powerful one. So I'm excited to have Brittney Phillips with me here, the founder of Blending Bravely, which talks about something I might be facing someday as a divorcee, which is blending two families together. Sounds simple enough, but there could be some resistance there, I'm assuming. So I'm excited to dive into this. It's not something we've talked about before. Brittney, thank you for coming again to make sure we get this message out to our audience. Please tell us more about you.
Hey, Tiffany, thanks so much for having me again. I'm happy to share my story over and over as many times as we need. A little about me. So probably over a decade ago, I found myself as a single mom. I'm divorced and kind of like thought my life was over point. and I was pretty young still. So that was sad that I felt that way. But I found it to be quite the opportunity to really expand my thinking of what life was going to look like. And so got back into the dating world, ended up meeting my husband who he had a child at the time and I had one. So we got to combine forces and and bring our families together. Just so we understand kind of the story. We ended up having 2 more kids together. So we have 4 kids total. So it's not just the 2 anymore. But when it was just the 2 kids and us, I found that it was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be. I thought our love and good intentions would get us through, and apparently it takes a little more than that. So that was rough. Big transition. We've been married for over 10 years now, and so done a lot of figuring out, learning the hard way. And as I look back, like hindsight, I'm like, we made that a lot harder on ourselves than we had to. And I think there were things we could have done to make the transition go a lot more smoothly. So that's why I do the work I do now with moms and families who are working to blend and bring people together and connect and find that unity that they're actually looking for. So that's why I do what I do. But that's quick version of my story.
So I might have to have you back just for the dating part, because I'm going, oh wait, tips on dating. I'm in that realm right now. So, but with blended families, because that's our focus today, with the resistance that might come with that you don't expect, what might be the first thing to consider when you know that you're going to become a blended family?
So when we feel resistance, it's basically like our emotions pushing back against something. That could be like we're afraid of something, conflict, something could be because we have certain expectations that we didn't realize we had. So that's kind of what resistance is just kind of that, almost like a wall. That's how I visualize it. And as we got married, I had these ideas of what it was going to look like as we were blending families. I thought, well, I was a school teacher. And so I thought, oh, well, our kids were going to get along really well. I know like managing kids, and kids usually generally like me. So this is going to be great. Well, my stepson was not having it that I was like here in this home and that he had a sibling all of a sudden. And he's like, who are these people? Which is so funny because when we were dating, totally fine. Like there were no indicators that this was going to be an issue. It wasn't until we were married and I moved into the house that it was like, whoa, wait. what's going on?
Wait, what?
Why are you telling me these new rules that in my house, right? Type of thing. So all of a sudden it was like crushing for me. I was like, well, this isn't what I thought. This is wrong. The kids who got along really well before we got married, all of a sudden are at each other's throats because they're used to being only like single children, like the only child in the family. And now all of a sudden they're not. They're sharing a space, they're sharing their parents, they're sharing like all these different aspects. And so that there was some resistance there. And then I found that actually my husband and we had some resistance too. And I think that came from trauma from previous marriages. We couldn't really cope with until we were back in a marriage that like were right in front of our faces. So like we've gone to therapy, had support and help, done a lot of healing, but you know, healing is a journey, not a one-time event. And so you'll think you're healed until something new comes up. Well, this was the new thing. And all of a sudden we're being faced with things and triggers are being brought up that I didn't know that I had more healing to do in that area. So resistant to things that were happening in our marriage as well. So lots of resistance going on.
It sounds like a lot of it has to do with expectations in relationships.
Totally. Totally. I always wanted this like nuclear family. That's what, like, can you think of any human child that was like, I really hope that I can be a stepmom someday? Like nobody says that.
No, we weren't prepared for that. No, there's no.
We want like the nuclear family with the little house and the picket fence and the 2 kids or whatever it is that you envisioned, right? Like there, you had something envisioned. And being divorced and then a single mom and then becoming a stepmom, like none of that was in my plan.
Right.
So yeah, I had some expectations and none of it was playing out. I never expected to try to be helping raise a child that didn't really like me. None of this was expected in any way. So yes, I absolutely had resistance to that. And I see this in so many of the clients I work with too. Like over and over, it's like the same story. Like, well, I just really want it to be like this. And we kind of get rigid in that place. And that's why we end up being miserable, is because we are so rigid. We're very inflexible in our thinking and trying to think outside the box in all aspects. And how the house is run and how the kids behave and how we parent with each other. That's a whole other issue. Like
that's a whole nother episode.
Bringing 2 parenting styles together. So, but that as soon as we can like release that resistance, everything shifts. Everything, like we're able to adapt to these circumstances.
And that's what this month is about. Like, I feel like it's such an appropriate topic at the beginning of the year because it's really kind of, I used to also call it reality check. It's like, what point did you realize you need to have resilience in more areas of your life? What did you need to let go of? Expectations. What did you need to let in instead? Probably some compromise, probably some compassion, patience, things that you weren't expecting to be a part of that process. Now I just co-parent and I understand that's just difficult enough. When a third party came in, it changed the dynamic of what was co-parenting before. And there's unfortunately their lack of communication, but it's very convenient because we've been living in 2 different states for so long that there's that side of the story. There's my side of the story. There's that household and there's my household. And then I've got going back and forth and between the 2 having to decide what to do about it. And so for me, I really had to embrace that. Okay, here's an opportunity for them to see how 2 different households are run. This is an opportunity for them to see what's going to work for them and what's not. Let's look at this in a positive way of, okay, well, you might like how they do some things over there. implement that into your house. But maybe there's things you like that we do over here, but this is still my house and this is still their house. And having to kind of enforce those things is really interesting, especially because they're a blended family. I'm not a blended family yet. So I understand that'll be a whole nother thing, because then there's another party involved. And so that would be a very interesting dynamic. But I'm curious with all of this, as we're transitioning from talking about resistance to resilience, what your definition of resilience is with your experience.
Resilience for me is just kind of the ability to adapt in our circumstances, to like be a little more flexible.
Yeah,
I think like I don't know if anybody else does this, but when I talk, I get like visuals in my mind. So as I'm saying, like, be more flexible, I'm thinking of Elastigirl, like trying to stretch around a corner, like, okay, here's a wall, like, that's totally fine. We'll go around it. Right. Being flexible.
We'll find a way.
We're going to figure this out. Like, I'm not going to throw my hands up and quit because this is hard, because it is hard. Whatever circumstance you're in, I guarantee you probably didn't plan on the life you had. And it is hard. That is like, it's like a slap in the face sometimes. And what gives us freedom or resilience is the ability to be able to say, like, okay, this is not what I wanted. What am I going to do about it? How are we going to handle it differently? I could be mad. And I could be mad forever. And like,
and then turn bitter,
miserable,
and then just stays with me. And then I'm giving power to the wrong place, and I'm wasting a lot of energy on things I cannot control.
Absolutely, yes, and that's not helpful. So you might want to stay there for a minute, because like we do want to validate that that's a real feeling and like that's a real experience for a minute, and then say, okay, now what am I actually going to do? How am I going to make this better?
Moving forward. Yeah.
100%. Yeah. So it really is like letting go of that control, letting go of this idea, these expectations, whatever it is, like wanting to control my life in this certain way. I can't. I only can control me, what I do, how I react, how I show up. I can't control what my kids do or say, what my co-parent does, what my husband does. I have no control in those areas. I have some influence sometimes, but
maybe persuasion, little persuasion.
Yes. Yes. But really, ultimately, what I control is me.
Yeah. And I think some of that too has to do with your relationship with yourself. And when you've been raised to have that nuclear traditional family, I think a lot of healing has to happen within yourself, of not holding any shame or guilt with that. Being a single parent is extremely common today, unfortunately. Having a nuclear traditional family is getting rarer and rarer. It's really too bad. It feels like there's really an attack on the family, which is the foundation of society. And this podcast is meant to, hey, let's get back to supporting moms. Let's get back to supporting families so we can have happy mothers, happy children, happy homes. And children definitely do better with a 2-person household. That is shown. And 50-50 custody, kids do better, but that's not the case for everybody. So when it's not the case, I have to find comfort in one child having one consistent parent who shows up. That's helpful. And then I try to think of the other people, the extra grandparents, the extra stepmother, the extra step siblings, as bonus for them, and just an extension of their nuclear family. That's not traditional by any means. But one of my daughters has a stepsister her same age, for example. How cool is that for her to have someone to relate to? They're planning their lives out together. Like, that's cool. I'm not going to interfere with that. I'm not going to say no to something like that. Right. I'm going to embrace that as this can have this is a good thing, but I'm also blessed to have a situation where we're of the same faith and I don't have to worry about the household. I think the other hard thing about blended families too can be when the standards aren't the same and there are things happening in the other household you're not okay with, or you're dealing with a co-parent that's a narcissist. And so it's a completely different thing when they go there and then you have to come home and it's like, what do you do with some of those more complex versions of blended families to help them navigate all the different moving pieces?
Yeah. That's a really good question. That's like the question, right? What do we do? And it's super common. I think you actually kind of touched on this already, but one of the most helpful things we can do for ourselves is try to like reframe it. Like instead of being like, this is the worst thing ever, to like, what is the opportunity in this? Or how could this ultimately benefit my child? Seeing two completely different households can have its downsides, but it can also, some kids experience life through like living it, having it like right in their face. And so they will feel the energy differences. They'll see results. Like they will very fully experience these two different households, and they'll be able to choose what they like. They'll know like really deeply, intimately what resonates more with them, right? They don't have to go try that in adulthood. So at least they can have that understanding. So like, where can we see this as an opportunity? Just really shifting the mindset has been really helpful for us and our family. We have had some things come up with co-parenting that we're like, oh, we wouldn't do it that way. Like, I feel kind of sick about this. And it's hard to admit, but it hasn't been all bad. It hasn't been all bad. Right. It's in some ways, it's like challenged me to think outside the box. And a lot of times what we do as humans, because we're human, is we are like, this is the way, this is the right way, this is how we should be doing things. And all the other ways are stupid. That it kind of comes down to like what we value, right? Yeah, right. These are my values, and my values are right, and everyone else's are stupid. And that's not true. When we get to that place of thinking like that's unhelpful. But when we can say like, well, I value this and this is what they value, there's actually they're saying value a lot. There's actually value in both of those things. Yes. There's lessons, there's beauty in all the things. But it really is, it takes a lot of humility to be like, my way is not like the only way. The only good way to do things, to be a parent.
You hit on something that's been on my mind a little bit. I was reading something and I didn't quite agree with what I was reading with, because it hit on the pride cycle for me. And if you got the newsletter this week, I mentioned it a little bit, but pride is putting yourself above or below anyone. And we have a real problem with that in society today. Instead of thinking that we are all of worth, we all have value, we're just different. And that's the beauty of it, that we're all unique and different. And we've got some extremely unique and different families today, but it's still a family. It's still got heart. It's still got love. It's still got mother, father, just different variations of it. And so not all is lost in those things. And I've compared and talked to divorced kids versus the parents stayed together just for the kids, and then they left. Anytime I come across a child that's been through divorce with their parents, I ask them about it. And it turns out that a lot of the time the divorce was necessary. Sadly, It was. And the kids were better off that the parents ended it sooner than stayed in it. And those kids often pick better relationships. They're on a better path and they're more solid. So we think, oh, I ruined my kids, collateral damage, and they're going to be so screwed up and all these things. But the truth is, and today kids are learning things a lot sooner than we did, a lot faster than we did, and they have to keep up with the pace of the world that they're in today. And so it's part of resilience. And apparently this generation needs to be pretty darn resilient. So they come with a lot of challenges that we as parents have to face. And then with bringing two families together, I think the expectation is at least everyone wants what's best for the kids. And usually I find if you can bring it back to what's best for the kids, usually that helps everyone be a little bit more willing to be doing the right thing and making the next right move for the child and the family, instead of seeing that narrow, no, it's this way, that I know what's best for them, and as they develop into individuals, we also have to accept that they have agency. So you can do the best parenting in the world that you want. You've done all the right things. You've checked off all the boxes, and they still choose a different path. We just have to know we're enough and that we're doing enough. And I'm sure that's a struggle in blended families. Like you're saying, like, I didn't know a kid could not like me as a stepmom. Like I'm what, like the evil stepmom? I can just imagine that, like going through all that. Or maybe you're like, what? No. So what is your experience with that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's really hard to not take everything personal
Mm.
when you're the step parent, because like you've heard people say that like being a mom is like the most unappreciated job. And I'm like, the mom is not the most unappreciated. It's the stepmom.
Stepmom.
The stepmom is the most unappreciated because
thought of
there's
that.
mom and then it's a step below that. So it's like you have to be so resilient. So if you are not like, okay, like so strong yourself, you will crumble. It will eat you alive. That role. It's so hard. And so the best thing you can be doing is working on yourself, like your emotional regulation, making sure you're taking care of your needs so you can show up in the best way. And if something is personal against you, like you can stand back up and like wipe the dust off, right? And try again, because it will happen. To the best step parents in the world. I've seen it over and over again. It's not really you. It's not personal. It's like it's the role.
Yeah.
It's such a tough, complicated role to be in.
Well, and especially as they're trying to develop an identity. I've noticed this with kids that find out they're adopted later. Like we don't realize how much of their identity is tied up in who is in their family, and their parents are being divorced. I'm a divorced kid, or I'm a blended family kid, or I'm a traditional family kid. Like, so when that gets rocked, their identity gets rocked. And I think that's where the struggle comes from, because they maybe, I didn't want a stepmom, I didn't want a stepdad, or I didn't want to be siblings with this person. I don't want to share what used to just be mine. That makes a lot of sense, because they're supposed to be pulling away at that age. And then to have someone new come in and invade as they're trying to figure out who they are, I'm just glad somebody told me, if your kids say that they hate you, they don't like you, guess what? That's just part of being a teenager. And because they're separating from you. They've been dependent on you for emotional regulation, for their development, for all these things. And it's time to pull away. So then add an extra set of parents or grandparents or other people into that dynamic as well. And it could be beneficial on one hand, but it could also be, now I have more to figure out. I have more to navigate. I have more relationships.
So like, what can we do with that? Like, you do your best as parents to create safety and security in the home. And kind of going back to what you were saying, when the parents stay together for the sake of the kids, that is not safety and security, because you can feel the tension in a home. Even if you don't see the parents arguing, kids are not dumb and they pick up on that. And if that is always the environment in the home, that is not safety and that is not security. No. And sometimes removing yourself from this person, maybe you're just in a really unhealthy cycle with that person. Like, you can create something new and healthy with somebody else, and you'll have to break some habits still. As a PS, you'll have to break some habits, but creating something healthy with somebody else can give that stability, security, safety for those kids. Again, I've seen this I have a client right now that I'm working with that they had a child that was really struggling while they were still married, got divorced. Things were still really hard with this child. And now that they're separated, they're divorced, this child is starting to like shine and thrive. And it is I'm so happy to like be being able to watch this happen, because they're like, I'm just like, there's the evidence. The instability in the home was affecting people more than we realize.
Environment is huge. We just moved, and holy cow, we should have moved sooner, but the timing of what needed to happen for this to happen was what had to happen. But yeah, when you move somewhere and the first thing out of your kids' mouths are, "Mom, people are being nice to us here," you're like, or like, I feel so much better. Or like what you're talking about, just to see a fast shift environment is really, really huge. And I think we underestimate too, at least I've noticed this. I have a teenager and they will act like they don't want certain things, but they do want the consistency from you. They do want that from you. They're just always pushing the boundaries, right? To see how far they can get away with not doing the stuff that needs done. But then they'll complain about
their job.
It's aren't done, right? Like, or like, "Mom, the house is messy." And I'm like, "Have you done your chores?" Like, there's like, that's funny, like walking contradiction, right? And then there's like you want to be a good co-parent, but your idea of co-parenting and mine are not the same. And I think on my end too, I don't even know the other party, the third party at all. We've never had a real conversation. They've been married for 3 years. I don't worry about it too much because my kids say they're treated well, but that's not what I pictured co-parenting would be at all. And I didn't get to choose you to be in my kid's life. I had no say in that whatsoever. And I just got lucky that it's okay, but it still bothers me, right? And so I'm looking at, if I become a stepmom, what does that mean for me and the other mom? And for me, I think it would be important to have, if the other party is willing, to really have a conversation about how do I support your child in this? You didn't choose me. You didn't choose me to be in your child's life. So how can I best support you and in your family, and realize that it's not just the husband that I'm getting. I mean, would be getting, I'm not there yet. Please don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm dating. Still, okay, available. No, but when I get there, I realize I'm marrying his family, his dynamics, like his habits, his relationships. You'd be taking on their ex and whatever that comes with it. And so do you want to be a part of that circus or not? Can you handle what that brings? It adds a whole nother layer to what you're looking for, because it's not just about you anymore. And it's important to find that partner who's right for you, but also what influence are they going to be in the role that they play in the influence of your child and in the family that you're attempting to create. And when you're divorced, recreate. And you really want to get it right this time around.
Right.
So what kind of conversations could you have? Have people done things like marriage counseling first before going in with a blended family, or family counseling? Or are there things, or are there extra steps that you could take to maybe help that along?
Yeah. So I'm actually currently working with a couple clients who are in the dating process. Like they're in the serious stage where they're like, we're thinking about blending, but like we would just want to make sure we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So,
good idea.
Yes. So, kind of my role in that is to like, just kind of guide them, ask the right questions, make sure they're asking the right questions. What we end up doing a lot is like, let's just watch. We're going to observe behaviors in our kids, in our new partner. We're going to be like looking for any red flags or green flags or any kind of sign, like signals, feelings that are off. And we're just going to observe those and just see what kind of happens, how things flow, because time is really huge, especially when we're trying to get in a blended family again. So as you spend time together as a couple, like the more time you can buy yourself before you're in another relationship, probably the better. I wish we could go back and in our family and give us some more time because it happened really quick for us. Like just a few months may not be an indicator of the whole like spectrum
Picture.
of how, the whole thing of what it's going to look like. So maybe my kid gets depressed in the winter, and like, how is my new partner going to handle that? Like how are they going to show up for the child in that way? Like, not that I want them to parent, but like, is that going to be really frustrating for them? Are they going to have a lot of empathy for that? And so I'm watching for all of those types of things. So I think time is really, really important. I don't, as I'm saying this, I'm not recommending like you jump into having your partner meet your kids.
No,
I think,
no. Yes.
Don't do that.
Don't misunderstand that. Getting the kids involved is just, don't do it.
Yes.
Don't do
so
it.
Like I would be pretty serious before you're introducing your kids, because you are figuring out your dynamic with the partner first. And if you're like, I feel really good about this, lots and lots of green flags, great. Yeah. Like, and then you're like talking about taking it somewhere more serious, then that would probably be an appropriate time to have them meet your kids and then start spending a lot of time together, like all of you together, just to watch and observe how they're interacting.
Because I think some people don't think about this. You may parent together really well, but you may not be great together as a couple. Because I think like I experienced that in one relationship, because our kids actually played with each other, which led to us meeting to each other. So they were already aware of each other. And then when that parted, holy trauma for my kids, not necessarily for his, but for mine. And it was interesting because some of the family reached out and they're like, but can they still be friends? And I'd like, I'll ask my daughter. I'm not going to placate here. I'm not going to tell her what to do, and she just flat out said no. And I just respected that.
Yeah.
I was like, things happened that affected my kids more. I don't think you guys realize that it wasn't just me that got hurt. You hurt my kids too. And that's my bad for bringing them in to a relationship that wasn't looked at the way that you're describing. I had never thought about blended family. I just love kids. So I just kind of was like, they're young. They like
it'll be fun.
They'll be fine. And they're older ones. I'm like, well, they have their own lives. I won't be that like, I just like felt like I could make it work. Like I could make it work. But then it became that. It was like making it work. You can't force something to work that isn't going to work. So I shouldn't have been surprised when it broke because it was being forced. And you can't force things,
Exactly.
It's just gonna be a hot mess. And that's not what you're looking for either.
Right. Yeah. And there are some aspects that like we can learn some skills and tools, like we can change, but we don't want to force it. Like, can we communicate as a couple in a healthy way? Like, what if we disagree? What does that look like? That would be a really big thing I would look at. How do we handle conflict? What do we do when we're stressed? How do we show up? Like, let's talk about finances. Like we're going to talk about all the hard things and see how we handle talking about the hard things. Like, how do those conversations go? And then we're going to talk about parenting, because that's a whole different,
and there are a gazillion different versions of styles for that are out there. It's not just, helicopter mom. And then, no, there are a lot of variations on this, depending on their childhood and what they picked up from. Did they come from a divorced family? Did they come from a blended family? I mean, there's all sorts of factors that need to be explored there. And I'm glad you're mentioning that.
Yeah. Yes. So I would definitely give that some time. And the other aspect to that is like, anyone can be like on their best behavior for a couple hours, right? Anyone can.
Yeah.
But it's really like, not that you would jump into this, but that's why having extra time together will help reveal like people's true selves. Because
I do everyday things too, because that's going to be life day in and day out. It's going to be like shopping and making the meals and doing the chores. And then you get to do fun stuff. But I think in dating, it is fun to do the fun stuff. If you're a hopeless romantic, you love the wooing and all of that, but it's not real life. I've been telling this to my girls after my experiences is, test who they are with their family, test them on finances, test them and see if they are someone that is willing to fight for the relationship with you for the right reasons. Then that's the person, because that's love. That's what our generation doesn't seem to understand. It's not just better over here, and it's not just the fluttery feelings and the hormones for 90 days. It's a relationship that's built on respect for who somebody is, having some common ground to build off of, whether that's your faith or your values or your goals, which with all of those, that would probably be best. And just being real with each other and honest, not putting on a show, so that you know what you're getting into. Because then you can decide, but then you also have to know who you are. And some people are in divorces because they got married before they knew who they were. And no one can love you for who you are until you know who you are. So that's another honest aspect of it. Are you honest enough with yourself and comfortable enough within yourself to be able to share different things? I think Runaway Bride, she didn't know what her eggs were, right? Like, I mean, something so basic like that should be known. I like this. I like these things in my life, because there's also those codependents, and maybe you don't realize you are this, but you can't just melt into somebody else's needs and melt into what somebody else has, because then you're just going to be drained and you're not going to know why. And you're probably going to attract the wrong person who's going to pick up on that as well. So you have to be whole. It's not two halves or I mean, it's kind of like, it's not two half families either. Let's not think about that way either. Like, it's two whole families coming together. It's not two halves of anything. And it's never 50-50. It's 100% in, day in and day out. So who's doing that for you? And I so want that for my girls. And it's going to be interesting to see how the next generations do. They're getting married later, they're having kids later, and that's not necessarily the best thing for your health, but they want to have stability in different things. But like, it's just interesting what family is evolving into, but they're cautious too, because they don't want to go through some of the same things they've seen us go through.
Right.
So how do I go, no, there are good men out there. There are good things out there. Like, so I want to expose them to couples who are working. I want to show blended families that are working. Like, I want those people that are figuring it out to be an influence in their lives and realize I'm not the only voice. And it's a good thing I'm not the only voice. So
yeah, that's true. That's such a good point. And as we're saying this, I just keep thinking too, like, you're not going to find the person that checks like every single box.
No.
The perfect partner. You won't find that. Because also, like, let's be honest, I'm not the perfect partner 100% of the time.
Right.
Okay. Like, if we're being full here.
I'm a human.
But what are like your top priorities? Yeah. What are your number one things? And if it was me, if I was back in the dating scene, maybe I'm going off on a tangent here, but if I were going back in time, like, probably number one thing on my list, because I've seen it over and over in relationships, it would be like, can they self-reflect? Can this person like take feedback?
There you go.
Can they be open enough to hearing some kind of criticism? And can I do that too? That's really important, right? Like, that's how we're going to grow and be an amazing couple, is if we can give each other that type of feedback, really honest, from a place of love type of feedback.
Well, and you're going to have to be that solid, because couples rely on each other more today than extended family, than neighborhoods. You really have to be a strong couple these days. I think that's part of why things are the way they are. And so you really have to be in that place to be a blended family on top of it. So you really got to do the things that you're talking about. And that's why we're spending a lot of time there, because if that isn't solid first, and then you go into blended family, well, it's going to kind of force that. So why not do the work first so that you're solid? And then you can handle what comes in with it.
Well, and if you think about it, in a blended family, your marriage relationship is the youngest relationship in the family, which is crazy.
Right?
Everybody else has like this solid base, and like the thing that's supposed to be the foundation is the newest thing. So you do have to make sure that like that is solid and that you keep it solid. It takes consistent work. So what happens a lot is people are like, yeah, we're solid. And then they get married and they're like, kids first. Kids are totally the priority. And like, kids are so important. Yes. Like, we should put some emphasis there. But if your marriage falls apart because you're always prioritizing the kids, it will not last. Yeah. It will not.
And it is a balancing act, because they do need taken care of too. I had somebody like flat out accuse me of still being single because I put the kids first. And I'm like, you don't know the whole story. Like, yes, I do love being a mother, but that's not what happened. But yes, I get that they're saying though too. But and that is the interesting dynamic of being a divorced mom, is you have these kids, and if you have them full time versus 50-50 or something like that, it's different. Like, it is. Like, if I want to go on a date, it's like, let me find a sitter. You could pay for a sitter, am I paying the sitter? Like, how is that happening? This is, and I need to plan. I can't be spontaneous about it, at least being in the community and stuff, versus, if I had family or if I had some different dynamics, it's different. And that's going to be the case with every family too. I think ages and age ranges too are also a thing. Like, there's a gap in between mine. And so if kids came in the middle, what would that look like? I'm kind of used to the gap now and how that dynamic works. Or if it was younger, or if they were older, like, because some guys my age have already raised their kids. So they're kind of on purpose, like past that, and not going to have to necessarily deal with the kids at home blended family, but it's still a blended family. It's just different. So I think that's another important aspect of it as well.
Yeah. No, it totally is. Somebody I read once somewhere said that, like, when we're prioritizing, not that we have to, but kids' needs should come first. Okay, we're meeting their needs, meeting my needs, and then the marriage relationship is the next priority. And I was like, meet the needs, meet their needs, meet my needs, marriage, and then the kids' wants would be after that. Because really what happens is when your marriage relationship is solid, we talked about this, the kids feel that.
The safety in it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it benefits the whole family. Everybody wins.
Absolutely.
When the relationship wins.
Because there's peace at home. There's camaraderie at home. There's compromise. There's understanding versus, confusion, because you don't know what's going on. Like the kids definitely feel that more than you realize. And
and you're setting an example. Like, here's what a healthy relationship looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's the idea of like, you are the role model that you're looking for. It's not someone else in the dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with you. And like we talked about kind of towards the beginning, is like, you can only control you and this present moment. Those are the only things you have control. You can have some influence, you can have some persuasion, you can have lots of love and good intentions and expectations. But at the end of the day, we face a situation and we decide if we want to be resilient or not, or if we're going to resist it. And the more we resist it, the more likely the bigger it gets, or the lesson just keeps coming back, because it's there to teach us something, either about ourselves or about relationships. And that's the beauty of family. Family helps us be better people. Being a mother has helped me be a better person. And I wouldn't trade that for anything, even though it's unique and it's messy and it's not what I expected at all. It's still not, and I'm not patient for it to change, but one day at a time. So that'd be the other thing, is just to kind of take it one day at a time, 1 hour at a time as you need to. And over time, like you said, it needs time, and then it gets better. Just like any other adjustment or transition in life, it just takes time. So planning helps, mentors help, coaches help, counselors help. But it really comes down to what actions are you going to take, and are they the right next course of action for you and for your family? And it doesn't have to look like anybody else at all. So don't compare. Just don't do the Instagram comparing thing. Please just don't. It's not real life anyway. It's just the highlight reels. And you've got your own highlight reel. Where can people find you to work with you? That's what I should.
So you can find me on Instagram. My handle is It's Me, Brittney P. You can get on my website. It's blendingbravely.com. Those are probably the best ways to reach out and find me. But blending families is an adventure, and there's going to be ups and downs, kind of like a roller coaster. There's going to be really fun times, and there's going to be some really scary times, and that's okay.
Well, I feel better prepared from this conversation, so I appreciate it. I'm sure there's someone else out there that's got this on their heart too. So thank you for sharing your message with our audience. All right, mothers, thank you for being with us. Please share, like, and help get this message out, especially if you like this episode. Feel free to comment, give us a review. If you know someone who needs this episode, share it with them. The links are here. We're on different social platforms, and we're moving some of them. You're going to notice that over the next few weeks and months. So please just follow where we direct that we're moving to. We have reasons. We want to serve you better, and that's why that's coming. All right. I believe in you. Believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you on another episode of the Resilient Mother Podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Please don't forget to subscribe so we can share this message. We are a worldwide podcast with guests all around the world, and we want to continue to grow this community. You can find us on socials. You could also be a guest. Look for that link below if you'd be interested in being a guest on the podcast. If you know a sponsor or would like to be a sponsor, please reach out to me or Catherine as well.
Sure. We want you all on this journey. We want to hear your stories. We want to share your stories. We want to gain strength from each other, because together we're stronger. And to never forget the blessing of being a mother and what we're creating. We're creating the future every single day of our lives. So get on this train with us and let's do this thing, moms.
I believe in you. Believe in yourself. God bless. And we'll see you around. Take care.